Welcome to another edition of the It's Cavalier podcast. It's your boy Mack, and today our Cleveland Cavaliers did battle with the Los Angeles Lakers in a rare 330 or 340. The NBA can't get its damn times right? 340 matchups with the Lakers. I love those, honestly. It's easy potting. It's easier for me to come on here and talk with a more level-headed mind for in regards to these contests. But this happens to be the 123rd game between the two franchises. Cleveland is now 53-70 all time against them after today's loss, and are now just 2-8 over the last 10 between the two. Now, more recently, as in this season, Los Angeles has taken both the rounds. They swept the Cavs. First matchup was on November 25th, as they defeated Cleveland 121-115, using a particularly dominant performance from Anthony Davis to do so. The Cavs just had no answer for him in that regard, as he just used a bevy of mid-range pull-ups, putbacks, and alley-oop jams to destroy Cleveland. He would finish that game with a game-high 32 points, 13 rebounds, and 3 assists. And honestly, it was much the same this time around, right? It was very much the same. I was really interested coming into this game, seeing what kind of answer they could throw his way. And I didn't honestly have to wait too long to find out what the case would be with that. Jarrett Allen, at least in that first quarter, was a pretty good foil for him, as AD did most of his work at the free throw line, as he drew a massive amount of contact throughout this game, especially in a high-scoring first quarter that saw him shoot 7 free throws, going 5 of 7 in the process alone. He was just a menace, man. Cavs had no answer for him. And I know many teams struggle with containing AD, but Cleveland, featuring 2 of the game's better defensive big men in Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley, you would hope that they would be able to kind of put a dent in what he typically does to teams. But it just wasn't the case, right? He was a menace all around the court tonight. He was doing a little bit of everything. And, although I knew it was going to be a tough game. It was going to be a tough game for the Cavs to be able to contain the likes of Anthony Davis. I thought that they would have been able to do a little bit better. Full stat line on Davis: 22 points, 13 rebounds, 4 assists, 6 fucking blocks, and 3 steals. And he went 7 of 11 from the line, including a single 3-pointer. Just there was no way to contain him. Cavs were not able to put anybody out there on him today and walk away feeling good about said matchup. There were specific possessions in which you thought, hey, the Cavs actually held their own there. There was one in particular with Donovan Mitchell who actually held his own against AD and caused him to miss a shot. But more often than not, AD was just there for putbacks, especially on the offensive boards, man. That was the most frustrating part of today's game in regards to the performance for AD. It was just his work on the offensive glass. And I got so many people in my mentions talking about how soft this team is, namely Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley, and them not being able to really put up a fight against the other elite bigs around the NBA. And games like today just don't do anything to dispel that notion. Now, we know coming into today's contest, Evan Mobley had been flat out balling. Despite the Cavs' struggles as a team, he was doing quite well. He was 3 or 4 straight games averaging 20 or more points, and he was been shooting the 3 ball pretty well over the last couple of games. The problem today, though, is that Anthony Davis is just so damn multifaceted that sometimes you just don't really have an answer. No excuses, though. There was absolutely nothing that the Cavs could have done to truly stop AD out there with the way that he was playing, because he's just such an interior presence out there, especially on the defensive end. I know there are a lot of people that believe that Anthony Davis should be a challenger for Defensive Player of the Year. It's justifiably so. He has been that good on that end. I mean, you don't garner 6 blocks if you're not out there just constantly giving your all. And that's exactly what he did. And it just hurt the Cavs time and time again. He's a fun player to watch, admittedly, but not at the expense of the Cavaliers. Now, I was also interested to see how JB would make up for the absences of 2 of the team's best perimeter defenders in Isaac Okoro and Dean Wade, in relation to the impossible task of trying to contain one LeBron James. And newsflash, there is literally nothing you can do to stop LeBron. You just try to contain him at specific points in a game. He's going to get his. We saw JB throw numerous bodies out there on him, whether it be Evan Mobley, Karis LeVert, George Niang, Max Strus. It was a collective effort, as it typically always is against LeBron. But he was just typically well-rounded self. But it wasn't even him, in my opinion, that was the deciding factor in this game. In my opinion, it wasn't even AD. AD was awesome. AD was fantastic. In my opinion, it was the former Ohio State Buckeye, D'Angelo Russell, who was really the deciding factor. D'Lo was just on fire today. There were some don't get it twisted. There were possessions in which I feel like the Cavs kind of gave him a free pass, but there were other possessions in which he just knocked down pretty contested shots. He was on fire in that first half. The man literally began the game knocking down 8 of his first 9 shots. And it was clear from very, very early on that he had it going on. He had 23 points at halftime, folks, at halftime. Now, he cooled down in a major way in that second half, scoring just 5 points, but he was still an ever-present threat to shoot the 3 ball out there, taking several heat checks throughout, and the Cavs just had no answer. And maybe that should have been the title of the pod, No Answers, because that typically was the case. Cavs had no answer for Anthony Davis. They had no answer for LeBron James. They had no answer for D'Angelo Russell. Hell, even Taurean Prince, former Cavalier. And there are a lot of players in this game today that played for both sides. I mean, you have Taurean Prince, you got LeBron, you have on the Cavalier side of town, you have Tristan Thompson. I know I'm forgetting a couple of others, but there are more than a few players out there today that suited up for both squads. But that being said, yes, just there were no answers. And I see Elliot Clausen down here saying, when does JB have answers? I don't know, man. Today is not a game I'm going to sit up here on my soapbox and talk about how JB is this and JB is that and JB is a great coach. I just can't do it. The one thing that I can say, though, is that you're not going to win many games, and it's hard for me to truly pin or blame this game on JB when you have your stars just not showing up. I mean, we know what's going on with Donovan Mitchell right now, that with the knee injury and the nasal fracture and him just having to push through it all. But he was 4 of 13 from the field, just 10 points today, 2 of 9 from 3-point distance. That's your star player. That's your best player out there, regardless of injury, right? Because a lot of people, they're not giving anybody else any type of slack or leeway in regards to injuries. And Donovan Mitchell is right there in that group, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, hard for me to truly pin it on JB solely or tell somebody that JB doesn't have an answer or has an answer when people just aren't showing up. Donovan Mitchell, 4 of 13 from the field. Darius Garland was probably the best Cavalier out there tonight. And, we're going to talk about him a little bit more later, but even him, this is still not a great game from him by his all-star level standards. I mean, 26 points on the surface sounds really, really good. But when you look at it viewed against the backdrop of just 11 of 25 from the field and 4 of 9 from 3-point distance, that's pretty good still. But 11 of 25 overall, that's not great. And then 2 assists. That's the other thing from his stat line that sticks out to me is, the lack of facilitation from him. And I guess you can look past that due to the fact that, he had it going on. He had the scoring punch. But I can't necessarily blame JB for his players not making shots, right? I mean, you can't blame JB for Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen not being able to out hustle Anthony Davis for loose rebounds or be able to, for that matter, to protect the rim against him. You can't. I mean, there's just, what are you going to do? You can't blame JB for Sam Merrill missing 4 shots from 3-point distance. Not trying to pick on him or anything, but that's my point. Hard for me to blame JB when guys just aren't stepping up. It's a collective blame. That's how I look at it. It is a shared blame. This is not a loss that goes on JB, in my opinion. I think it's something that you just have to look at the entire team and just say, well, you guys lost this shit together. And Nikki Goel, sorry if I mispronounced that. I kind of agree with that. I think you can blame JB for some of the types of shots. Too often, DG, LeVert, DM aren't attacking the right matchups. Some of that is on JB to scheme up specific specific things to get these guys better looks, right? And to get into sets quicker and to actually operate in a functional manner. But at some point, your guys just kind of have to step up, Nikki. I mean, you cannot consistently blame this on coaching. It is literally a player thing as well. Guys, JB cannot go out there and make shots for them. He can't make Donovan Mitchell knock down shots. He can't make Darius Garland go out there and facilitate or be aggressive. But, to Tom K's point, Cavs played timid, afraid to take open threes. Yeah, I can beat a dead horse and say JB needs to be on these guys' ass and tell them that they need to take as many shots when they have them available, or just look to be aggressive. But I can't necessarily pin that solely on JB. It's a collective effort. But I think, Nikki, this is to your point. Agree, guys have to step up. But at some point, when does JB take responsibility for their lack of rhythm? That's a tough question, man. And it's not something that we may ever get an answer to. Only thing I can say is that this is a make or break season for JB. JB is going to have to answer for all of these things in a few short weeks, right? In a few short weeks, we could very much be looking at the end of the JB Bickerstaff tenure in Cleveland, the end of the JB Bickerstaff era in Cleveland in just a few short weeks once the postseason begins. And depending upon the result of that, whether the Cavs go out in frustrating fashion, get swept in the first round, or lose in a disappointing fashion in the first round, or hell, I've even heard people say that even if JB wins a series in the first round and then goes out in the second round, he's still canned after that. There are all these different possibilities, but at the end of the day, I don't know. I mean, we can talk about players not being in rhythm and that being JB's fault, but at the end of the day, guys still have to go out there and shoot and be efficient, and some of that just does not fall on the coach. Some of that is more coach. Some of that is more player dependent. But that's what it is. Yeah, I mean, what else can I say? I don't know. I mean, that could easily be the slogan for this team right now. I don't know. What's wrong with the Cavs? I don't know. Why is JB still coaching the Cavs? I don't know. Why isn't Darius Garland playing up to an all-star caliber player? I don't know. Why are we suffering so many injuries? Who did we piss off? I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of I don't knows going around. And I'm not laughing because I think it's funny. I'm laughing because literally that's all I can do. That's how frustrated with this team I am at this point. I mean, and Josh, to your point down here, Josh Hunter says JB is struggling with certain lineups or ATO, end of quarter plays, DG with consistency scoring, Dom being hurt. Bigs, I don't know. Role players struggling. I don't know. All I can say is that there are numerous issues with this team right now, and they have a very short span of time to try and figure it out before they go to the playoffs. Now, we don't know who our matchup is going to be. It's, if they get the 2 seed by some chance, they're probably looking at one of Miami or Philadelphia, which is not an enviable matchup. But, at this point in time, as I was conversing with somebody earlier, at this point in time, it doesn't matter if the matchup is Orlando, Indiana, Miami, Philadelphia. The Cavs could lose to any one of those teams with the way that they're currently playing, because you just don't know which version of the Cavs you're going to get on a night-to-night basis. That's all I can say. I mean, Elliot also says Strus was supposed to be averaging 15 points a game. He might be the biggest bust in a long time. I can't agree with that. I mean, Strus was awful today. I mean, just 5 points on 2 of 8 from the field. But I think, similar to Donovan Mitchell, he was dealing with issues himself in regards to his knee. And I think that's all I can boil it down to, because there was a large stretch during the season that Mack Strus had actually been a very, very productive player. I mean, the shooting percentages, they weren't what you wanted them to be, but he was adding in so many damn areas, whether it be playmaking, secondary playmaking, whether it be rebounding, underrated defense, toughness out there, leadership. A lot of intangibles, but just purely from the on-court stuff, I can't say that Mack Strus has been a bust. I mean, it hasn't been like the greatest season for him, and it hasn't been a worthwhile year. It's not gonna. I'm not gonna look at him and say, "Hey, this was the best signing of the free agency period." but I also can't say he was a bust because there have been numerous games where he has shown up and where he has made his presence felt. I mean, he hit a game winner to save the Cavs' ass not very long ago. So I can't agree with you there. But with that being said, I mean, everybody seems to be struggling right now, with the exception of maybe a couple of players. Karis LeVert, he was another, I guess he was kind of a plus tonight, 21 points, 7 boards, 8 of 14 off the bench. You're definitely going to need him to fill a big role come the playoffs when you need additional shot creation and facilitation out there, especially if Donovan Mitchell continues to stay hobbled and Darius Garland is as inconsistent as inconsistent as can be. But at the end of the day, I mean, you need more. You truly need more. Um, Josh also says, yeah, Max has been pretty darn good absent his scoring. The problem is that now everyone else is struggling to score, so now it's magnified. Yeah, I mean, that was never supposed to be the role that he was supposed to be in. Yes, it's nice to have, because at the beginning of the season, Max was giving us like 13, 14 points, maybe 5 rebounds and a couple of assists a game. But that was never supposed to be his role. He came in, he was signed to provide spacing, to provide much needed gravity and balance to that starting lineup, especially out of the front court where you have two mostly non-shooting bigs. And he was doing that to begin the season. The percentages they were not what you wanted them to be to begin the year. And they have kind of been that way all season, but he still has some gravity to him and he still draws guys out of the painted area. And my only hope is that come the playoffs, that starts to pick back up. That's all I can say. I mean, as somebody already pointed out here, it's a bunch of I don't knows, and that's really all I can say. This loss today sucks, but I'm not going to sit here and act like the sky is completely falling. I should throw in the towel, things of that nature. There's already enough people doing that. There are any number of reasons you can point to for this team struggling, and the reality of the situation is that this could end up being a lost season, a lost year, mostly due to the inconsistencies and the injuries throughout. And the most unfortunate part about that is that it could ultimately cost the Cavs Donovan Mitchell, and that is literally where I'm at. If I was Donovan, with the way that these injuries have been, and with my own injury, right? I just had to get a PRP injection. My nose just got fucking busted. If I was Donovan, personally, I would be looking at this as a lost season and just giving it one more go around before I make my ultimate decision. But free agency and other teams going after him, it's going to be alluring, right? And I don't think there are many teams out there really that can offer him a better shot at both getting as much money as he can, and being competitive for an extended period of time with all of these guys not truly in the primes. But at the same time, I can also see Donovan maybe feeling like this team just isn't it. Do I think that's the case? No, I still believe in this core. I still believe in this roster. I still believe in this franchise. But at the end of the day, it could end up being a lost season through nobody's fault, and Donovan could still end up bolting or requesting out. I don't think that we're going to be tipped, in any direction or what, because Donovan has been the ultimate professional. He keeps these things tight-lipped, and nobody truly knows what he's thinking. And I know that frustrates a lot of people. Like, why aren't you signing on the dotted line? Why haven't you provided a commitment one way or another? That's just not who Donovan is, and that's okay. And from a financial aspect, it makes a lot of sense not to extend early. But I'll get to the chat here. I see some questions being asked. Thomas Regula says, are you worried about style of last defeats in Phoenix, Denver, and tonight? Mental side of this team is very weak. I think that at the end of the day, I am worried from the aspect of this team not being able to get right from an injury perspective, right? Do I think there are some mental blocks there? Yes. Darius Garland probably has the biggest mental block of all, just because you weren't seeing a ton of aggression out of him, post the jaw injury. But at the end of the day, as a collective unit, I do feel like there are moments where this team does rise to the occasion, but it's not consistent and it is often ill timed, right? It comes when it's too late or it's just not a consistent wire to wire effort throughout. So I'm not I'm not worried that this team is mentally checked out or anything, but I hate seeing this team lose. I mean, but you look at the teams that they're losing to, it's not like they're shitty teams. LA is a very good team. You put them in the East, they're probably a top 4 seed with the way that they're playing. And I think they have now won what 9 of their last 10, something like that. They're getting hot at the right time. Cleveland obviously is not. But then you look at Phoenix. Phoenix is also a very, very good team, and they got better at the trade deadline with the acquisition of Royce O'Neal and others. And I don't feel shame in losing to them. I think the blowouts definitely suck ass, but I'm not going to look at those losses and say to myself that they are like mentally not ready. But clearly, there's some issues going on in that aspect. Josh Kunter says, if we're healthy, do you tweak the lineups based on matchups? Like, does Dean Wade get a start if we get good rebounding opponent, or does the back end of the rotation just shift? I think all of this is pending upon whether or not Dean Wade actually gets healthy, right? We haven't really heard a lot about Dean Wade. I mean, he went away for the birth of his child and he came back with an injury, or he'd been dealing with an injury and it just wasn't really detailed to the public. And we haven't heard anything. It sucks, but if I'm looking at these things, it's just I don't even know if we go into a rotation. Hold on one second. Oh man, children, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Yes, very, very cute when she wants to be. Definitely, that is Winter. For those of you who have never seen her before, she's growing along with this podcast, getting tall out here. But I look at the matchups that this team could potentially face in regards to some of the more lineup dependent things, and obviously the thing that sticks out to me is New York Knicks, right? You're talking about physicality, you're talking about rebounding, you're talking about having big bodies out there with Mitchell Robinson just returning to the fold. And I know Julius Randle has kind of been ruled out for the remainder of the season. But I look at a matchup like that and I say, hell yeah, Dean Wade and mostly probably Tristan Thompson, some of the guys out there that you brought in this past offseason. Hell, maybe even, and I know this is not going to sound right to some people out there, but maybe even George Niang, not because of the physicality, but because of the spacing, because that was the big issue in that series, right? You didn't have spacing out of the front court. Now we saw how much the lineups with Dean Wade and Jarrett Allen, or for that matter, George Niang and Jarrett Allen work, because it essentially allows you to play with one true big out there, open the floor up for everybody, especially the ball handlers and drivers out there. I think that there are definitely going to be specific matchups where you do have to kind of tweak the lineup and say, hey, Dean Wade, or hey, George Niang, maybe you guys won't get a ton of minutes in this specific game. And I think that's what it'll be. It probably won't be full on matchups. It probably won't be full on series. It'll probably be game to game. If a specific player is struggling and you're noticing, hey, we need a little bit more spacing, then you need to put George Niang out there because we know he's a volume shooter and he offers you something that Dean Wade does not in that regard. And then vice versa. Maybe you if Dean Wade is healthy enough to suit up, you play him out there because of his defensive capabilities, and he can space the floor. He just doesn't do it with a lot of volume. But there are definitely matchups out there like that where you might need to switch it up. I mean, if you get Philadelphia, there's no way you don't play Tristan Thompson, because Joel Embiid is just such a massive dude out there and he's consistently given Cleveland problems. Maybe even Damian Jones. I don't know, just to throw additional bodies at him. But there are definitely matchups that you look at and say, hey, we're going to have to adjust the lineup as needed. But I do hope, I do truly hope, and I assume that Dean Wade will be back at some point. And maybe they're holding him out for the playoffs. Hell, maybe they should be holding Donovan Mitchell out at this point for these final 4 games of the season, because at this point, I don't know if you want to risk him getting any further injured. I don't know. That's truly where I'm at with the team, though. It just, you don't know which version that you're going to get, so you're going to have to use everything that you have at your disposal. Alonzo Allen, I knew somebody would come in here and say this. You're entitled to that belief, Alonzo. Alonzo says, let's be real. Donovan was not and will not re-sign with the Cavs when the time comes. Hard to say. All I can say, Alonzo, is that if this Cavaliers team goes out in the first round in disappointing fashion, especially, Donovan is gone. All right, we can all but assume it's not like a foregone conclusion, but I never want to speak on somebody's behalf. I can't speak for Donovan, but what I can assume is that if they flame out in the first round and maybe even flame out in the second round, assuming they win the first round series, Donovan still might leave. We just don't know. He's been that tight-lipped. He is entitled to that, just as you are entitled to this opinion. I don't know. Yet another I don't know, right? That truly should have been the name of this live pod. Dropout Bear says, what do you think of Jordi Fernandez as head coach? I see that name being floated out there a lot, and honestly, I like it. I mean, if JB is let go, though, I think the Cavaliers are going to search by and large for a ready-made coach, right? I don't know if they're going to go and try and give somebody else a newer face or a fresher face, or somebody who does not have a proven playoff track record a chance. I think that Donovan, especially if Donovan stays, and JB gets fired, they're going to want to go and get an established head coach. So hard to say. I do like Jordy, though. Nikki Goel says, when we are getting out rebounded and outsized, do you have confidence in JB to adjust by leaning into more shooting and pace? He didn't have a choice last year, but hasn't made that choice this year. Honestly, I kind of disagree. I do feel like there are specific games in which he's tried to do that. The problem is people aren't making the shots. I mean, the Cavaliers, when you look at it today, they took 35 threes. You want to take a guess on how many of those they made? Just 11. They were 11 of 35 today. They were 31% from the three-point line. Conversely, LA, they shot the lights out. I mean, mostly behind D'Angelo Russell, right? But they were 16 of 37, which is good for 43% from three-point distance. What can JB do if, one, they're getting out-rebounded, and two, can't make shots? That's not on the coach for the most part. There are different things. JB does have to scheme up ways to get these guys open and free them up for shots. But at the end of the day, guys still have to drop them, right? So I don't know. I think that I have more and more faith I have more faith this year than I did last year. I'll put it that way, because not necessarily just because of JB, though, but because of the added weapons, right? Because now you do have the ability to space floor a little bit more with Max Strus and George Niang, Sam Merrill, different options that you just did not have last year. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at. Nikki also says, we've also seen JB force 3 non-shooting lineups. I'm just worried he goes back to that. With JB, I don't know. But I'd never know what JB's thinking. There are some rotations that he puts out there, some lineups that he puts out there where I question. I'm like, JB, do you really want to do that? Is that really what's called for at this point in time? Should we be going this route? But I don't know, man. I try to support him to a point, but at the end of the day, this is a results-based league, and if he can't get the job done come the playoffs, he will be canned. That's just the reality of the situation. Dropout Bear says, I understand your point on Jordy, but do you think Coach Bud would be much different than JB? Maybe from an experience standpoint, but at the end of the day, I don't know, man. I think the Cavs, I truly don't know what option that they would go in with. I see I'm gonna have to end this pod pretty quickly. But with that said, I like Bud, but I just don't know if I would sign on for Bud, because I just don't think he would be that much of a difference maker right now in this point in time. I don't know, but I think that this is all going to come down to Donovan Mitchell's opinion, right? Because clearly, even if they win a playoff series, they're going to ask Don, like, hey, are you going to sign? Are you going to, what direction should we go in? Is JB the guy that you want for the foreseeable future? If you sign this extension, is this the man that you want tied to you? Do you have enough confidence that he can lead you to a championship? And that's what it boils down to. But you guys see Winter over here, so I think this is a perfect way to end off. Cavaliers will take on the Los Angeles Clippers in this next game, and we could get a similar performance. There are definitely different things that you can take away and say, hey, this is a little bit better. Darius Garland, he was a little bit better tonight, although the stat line won't fully suggest it, just because the 2 assists look suspect and 11 to 25 doesn't speak volumes about being great, but he was probably the best Cavalier of a pretty dreadful bunch today. And Karis LeVert, that was another plus today. That said, hopefully we are able to get some type of W to cling to heading into the playoffs. Go Cavs. Have a good one.